Gary Gygax's daughter has spoken out over the accusations that were made over the weekend in the Dungeons & Dragons 40th anniversary history book that goes on to the full attack of Gary Gygax, the man who created Dungeons & Dragons. So this video is an update to the one I did over the weekend, which is not something very common for me, as Gary Gygax's daughter has come out to make several defenses in a Facebook post defending him from the accusations of him being sexist or any other kind of bigoted. And while some people are accusing the stance of not going far enough to defend him, I don't know exactly what you expect her to go out and say when she has her certain kind of leanings, and the fact that she said anything at all is quite fascinating and impressive and must be commemorated. She should not be attacked for not saying enough. So like, subscribe, and let's get into the article. Coming from over at Fandom Pulse, written by Fandom Pulse, Gary Gygax's daughter calls out her father sexist in response to recent Dungeons & Dragons controversies. Now, I don't agree with everything that Fandom Pulse says, and this is one of the areas where they are calling out the fact that she calls her father sexist. That's not exactly accurate to the situation at hand. I mean, it's not inaccurate either, but it's putting a little bit too much pressure on this article and what she said than actually taking it for its merit. Because what she ends up saying is 100% true, even when she does technically call Gary Gygax a sexist. And so I will say there are a few things that Fandom Pulse says in this article that I have some issues with, and I will be addressing those as well. So for those who either are not aware or have not checked out my previous video, you should check out my previous video. I think it's my best piece of work. There were some statements made in the 40th anniversary, the making of original Dungeons & Dragons, which calls out and attacks many of the different assets to the game, including this one statement written in the preface by Jason Tondro. Some people have charitably ascribed this language to authors working from bad assumptions. In the 1970s, historical war gamers in America were predominantly white, middle-class men. It isn't surprising that they would dub a class of soldiers of the fighting man, but when in the page of the Greyhawk, the description of the Queen of Chaotic Dragons includes a dig at women as a lib, the misogyny is revealed as a conscious choice. It is an unfortunate fact that women seldom appear in original D&D, and when they do, they're usually portrayed disrespectfully, using that kind of language to say that the game was sexist. But of course, what he fails to acknowledge is the term fighting man is a gender-neutral term. As explained in the other video, the term man is the suffix in reference to human. Man as a suffix is a gender-neutral term. It has always and will always be gender-neutral. And of course, the accusations of being sexist aren't nearly as bad as the accusations over race. Some language in the first iteration of D&D present a moral quandary. The documents reproduced in this book include many pages of charts and tables alongside lists of monster spells and magic items, but that game content also includes a virtual catalog of insensitive and derogatory language, words that are casually hurtful to anyone with a physical or mental disability, or who happen to be old, fat, not conventionally attractive, indigenous, black, or a woman. And then, of course, Tondra throws a tantrum over the fact that in this game, slavery appears in the original D&D not as a human tragedy that devastated generations over centuries, but as a simple commercial transaction, ignoring the fact that, well, slavery was nothing more than a financial transaction designed to sell the oldest natural good, being other people. And of course, I'm willing to bet Tondro only believes that certain demographics were ever enslaved, completely ignoring the fact that the word slave originated from Slav, as in the Slavic, from Northern Europe, who were enslaved by Turkish and other Muslim groups, and of course also failed to accept the fact that literally every single racial group or ethnic group have been enslaved at some point in history. As I covered in that other video, all of these statements are false, are completely ludicrous, and just go ahead to destroy a legacy that these people have nothing to do with because they want to destroy the legacy so they can prop up their own. And of course, they continue whinging about all the racism, sexism, yada yada yada, to the point that Elon Musk and Grums called them both out, as Grums had tweeted, D&D creators, Gygax and others are erased and slandered at the same time. WotC and Hasbro just released the new Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as the 40th anniversary making of D&D book, whose forward slams the original creators in an attempt to distance yada yada. And that led to Elon Musk coming up and saying, nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to trash Gary Gygax and the geniuses who created Dungeons & Dragons. What the fuck is wrong with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast? May they burn in hell. Which I wholly agree. This is a company that has lost its way entirely and deserves its comeuppance. And now, of course, as I said multiple times in my comments to my other video, and I totally agree, maybe we should wait for Dungeons & Dragons to fail a little bit more so Elon Musk can buy them out. Because if he can save Twitter, maybe he can save the greatest tabletop RPG ever invented. But until that happens, I will gladly be sticking with Pathfinder. Even though Paizo is just as much of a piece of shit, at least they don't let it bleed into their tabletop game. But now, of course, that's all a recap. Where things have actually picked up is in the statement written by Heidi Gygax Garland. So I figured instead of reading it on this terrible font and this aggressively bright background where it's blinding you guys, apologies, I think I'm actually going to go over to Facebook and look at the actual statement, and that way we can also look at some of the comments made. Regarding the post by Ben Riggs, D&D co-creator Gary Gygax was sexist, in my opinion, much seems to be taken out of context and pieced together. I cannot verify the sources, although I truly believe they are incomplete and or incorrect. I think Frank Menser states his insights on this eloquently. As from my perspective, I do not believe my father was racist or misogynistic. Was he sexist? He was born in 1938 to a father born in the 1880s and a mother born in 1906. He was raised in a traditional Anglo-Saxon Protestant family with traditional biblical family values where the male was the head of the household. In my opinion, yes, this is sexist and doesn't hold up to our more enlightened standards today. Yet, he was a loving father and husband who valued all of his children and his wife. All three of his daughters played D&D with him at some point, but I happen to be the only one who still plays. In short, he wasn't perfect, but he was far from all the negative accusations that are resurfacing, and I'm extremely proud, as a strong, independent female, shut the fuck up, to have Gary Gygax as my father and my family legacy. Now, I think that's a really, really sweet sentiment. I wholly agree with everything she had to say there. I have no problem with that statement. Now, where Fandom Pulse has an issue with that statement, I can see why they have an issue, but I think they are blowing it completely out of proportion. Appearing as a defense of Gygax, unfortunately, the post does call Gary Gygax sexist by modern standards, and also attacks traditional biblical family values as regressive. Gygax having Christian values is a positive, not negative, and shows how insidious the woke mind virus is in corrupting our culture, including systems like Dungeons & Dragons, which in prior editions to the modern Wizards of the Coast era took great care to ensure it was mindful of Christian beliefs. Heidi Gygax Garland is part of the problem of politicizing tabletop gaming that's gone on from extreme left, having signed on earlier this year to Gamers for Harris, a campaign to try to pressure the gaming community into supporting Kamala Harris for president by making a list of industry professionals that supported the failed candidate. Now, my issue with some of the things that they say here, I personally do not accept the notion that D&D has to be a pro-Christian thing. I am not a Christian. Now, I have no issue if it is a pro-Christian thing as long as it respects non-Christian values as well. Or if by respecting Christian values, it just respects pro-social values. And then, of course, I don't actually think she's calling him a sexist. She said that he was sexist for now, but Gygax is dead. In fact, Gygax has been dead for 16 years, so it's not really the kind of complaint that I would be making here. Yes, she said he's sexist, but that's because it probably is true. He probably is sexist by today's standards. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. The thing is, when you call someone sexist, you're not saying they're sexist today. You shouldn't be saying that they're sexist today. You're saying they're sexist as from the time they were alive in. For instance, when I call H.P. Lovecraft a racist, I'm not saying he's racist by today's standards. I'm saying that he was racist given the time he was alive. He literally named his black cat N-word man. In case you don't believe me, here's it right here in plain text. And so truthfully, I think that there's nothing wrong with what she said here. She's not calling him sexist. She said that some of his values were sexist. There's a very big difference in those two ideas. And she's not even saying they were sexist back then. She's saying they were perfectly fine for when he was alive, though they might be seen as regressive or sexist today. There's nothing wrong with that statement. Now, of course, I do think it's funny that she was part of Gamers for Harris, but I'm not surprised whatsoever, given the fact she called herself a strong, independent woman. But the fact that she has been so ideologically captured and can still be so honest as to defend her father, unlike many other children of famous people, such as the granddaughter of Walt Disney, who frequently goes out to attack him for being an anti-Semite and a bunch of other insulting things that are completely untrue, and instead defends him and defends the fact that he was an amazing person. And there are a bunch of other good comments. For instance, Heidi Gygax elaborates that not to mention it matters as far as gaming, but he had several close friends and family members that were LGBTQ+, and all I ever knew them as were friends and family, as it should be. Now, I do like a lot of people in this circle, and I have no issue with any person who's in this entertainment sphere, but I have an issue with this statement from John Della Rose. I hope with his Christian background he encouraged them to repent and accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Because either he's being serious, and I do have a bit of an issue with that as a bisexual fag myself, or he's joking, which is not appropriate on this kind of statement because it isn't necessary, because she isn't being rude in this statement. And of course, there's also this person who's filling in some more. One of the big inspirations for OG D&D was Pulp, Sword, and Sorcery in the 30s, nearly 100 years ago in medieval history. It's a game that was conceived in the 70s. This clown Riggs built his entire hustle on it. There's an idea, why doesn't he create something original instead of writing coattails? Real fans of D&D know the score, because these people are idiots. They're morally and creatively bankrupt. Nothing is too far for them, but they have no ability to create on their own. That is why they must destroy everything else and then claim it for their own, because they think in their twisted minds they're fixing it. And most of the remaining comments on there are all people coming out to defend either Heidi or Gary, or attack the idiots who are behind the forward, who are behind the preface, and who are behind all of these other things, attacking Gary Gygax, the original creators of D&D, aside from him, and the entire legacy of the franchise, because they are idiots who do 1,000,000% deserve to be laughed at. And I will say there are some people who are taking the Christian thing a little too far. Now, to be very clear, if someone wants to say that, they're fully welcome to say that, and I will not even disavow someone for saying that, though I will disagree and will publicly disagree with them. They are perfectly welcome to say what they think. But I truly believe that Heidi Gygax coming out and saying this is truly a phenomenal thing, because she could be like Walt Disney's granddaughter. She could be like all of these people who descended from these amazing men who created amazing things, and she could double down and attack them, despite the fact that every single thing in their life comes from the fact that these men did something phenomenal. But instead, she came out here, she defended her father, and I'm sorry, but her statement has nothing wrong with it. She didn't actually call Gary Gygax a sexist. She simply said that some of his ideas would be considered sexist by today's standard. But that's really just my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you guys think that she really was calling him sexist. This really was a thinly veiled insult as in the guise of an apology. And I will see you guys on the next one. And make sure to check out my other video.